So good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're located in this beautiful earth. Welcome to TechGlamLIVE. I'm Joe Mejica.
And I'm Doreen Pepers.
Today, we'll be joined by our special guest, Phil Kuligowski, who is our security TSA. Hey, Phil, how are you doing today?
Good. Thanks for having me.
So today on TechGlamLIVE, we're going to be talking about one of the biggest challenges organizations are faced with regarding security. Network traffic is traversing our outside perimeters to an increasing number of remote locations. We have roaming users, we have SaaS apps, and all this is going to the cloud. How do we solve for that? Do we use on-prem security appliances? My vote is no. That is an outdated solution that is inefficient, expensive, and leads to a poor user experience. Today, we're going to be chatting with Phil, who's going to lead us in an in-depth discussion around SASE, with an emphasis on cloud-delivered firewall and secure web gateway as the solution to this problem. Plus, we're going to be giving away a WebEx camera.
And on top of that, we're going to be also giving away some other prizes as well. And later, we're going to show how you're eligible to not only win these prizes, but an opportunity to also win this camera. So until then, sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. So Phil, the floor is all yours.
To jump right in. So today we're going to be really covering really how Umbrella protects the end users and how we can extend our perimeter security from what we've essentially been doing very standard. I would say pre-COVID, it was very the structure of how our architectures was many of our users came into the office, or our employees came to the office. They were protected by our firewalls, our web gateways that were on-prem. And, because of COVID, we've kind of had to shift into the different ways of how we're working, right? And one of these ways of working differently is everyone's remote. So how do we protect those users? And one of the challenges that we saw, and one of the initial steps that my customers mainly went, was they said, hey, how can we expand out our VPN? Well, that's great, but then we ran into challenges. Those customers specifically ran into challenges of throughput, because now all the customers that were on-prem are now having to come in through the firewall, and it created a bottleneck. So what we've done is we've essentially tried to look at different ways to expand our footprint, but also provide security as these now this sort of new normal that we're in, that we can move towards having these users be offsite, but have the protection that they need, as well as the resources that they need to get to when they're internal. And so as a part of that, what we're going to look at today is really the Umbrella solution, which incorporates many, many different products. So that is something like DNS, cloud delivered firewall, secure web gateway, and a couple other little pieces that I will talk about. But the one thing that I do want you to get out of this is really just looking at how this slide and everything works, because this is kind of the foundation of what we're going to cover today. I will jump into a demo of how we would configure some of these things and what this would look like within the actual dashboard. But this is sort of the framework of how everything works. And it all starts with DNS. So whether we're using a corporate-owned laptop, whether we're on our own phone, whether we're at a branch site or at a Starbucks, we have different ways of having protection in place with our cloud delivered firewall, secure web gateway, and DNS protection. So as you can imagine, these devices that are on the network, or even if you want to say off the network, we can say that too, but we need a level of security on this device. So let me use my laptop, for instance. So what I do is I have Umbrella running on my laptop. There's a couple different ways that you can deploy this, but it has DNS layer security. So what that means is that when I attempt to plug in a website into my web browser, generally what's going to happen is there's going to be a request that gets sent out over UDP port 53 to Umbrella to recurse that DNS. So it needs to understand, it needs an IP address to know where I'm trying to go. So that's the first thing that's going to happen. And there's a lot of value that can be had with that. So with Umbrella, we started, it was around, excuse me, our service came online around 2006. And what we did was we slowly added in security layers into that. So if I know that the DNS is going to somewhere malicious, we can stop that connection right there. So it's really a first line of defense. And so one of the things that, and really the beauty of this is that our solution with DNS security, it's one of the easiest things to implement because your organization is already using DNS. Everything revolves around DNS. So what our Talos incident response team does and I've seen this firsthand, is that if a customer has a breach, one of the first things that customers are looking to do is how can we have protection quick and easy without expending resources while we do our incident response. I also had a customer that got hit with some ransomware and they completely cut off their internet circuit. They came to us and said, hey, how can we go about protecting our infrastructure as we start to bring things online? We're going to do a block all on our firewall, but we want to make sure that any other connections out are secure. Well, DNS security is one of the easiest ways to do that. So we went in, we changed the resolver, so it's as simple as changing an IP. And then what that allowed us to do is see any connections out. And we were able to add a block. So any traffic that was trying to go out over DNS was blocked unless explicitly allowed. So that's why our incident response is one of the first things that they'll come in and implement, because it's simple and easy to change. It gives you pretty much instant visibility, and it's just very, very powerful. So that's kind of the first aspect of this whole design and architecture. Really, the second would be this cloud delivered firewall. So, as traffic comes from these devices and it gets passed to our DNS, that's then going to get sent to our cloud delivered firewall. So this is an outbound firewall. So in this case, you're still going to require an inbound firewall. So if we're talking about a branch or the perimeter of your network, you still do have to have a firewall there to block any sort of outbound traffic coming in. So this is inbound traffic coming in. This is specifically just for outbound traffic, but it is very powerful. Some of the value of this is it allows us to inspect on any IP port or protocol. It allows us to do layer 7 application visibility and control. And then from there, with Umbrella, we also now have the ability to do intrusion prevention systems. So if you're familiar with a company that we acquired a long time ago, Snort has been around for a very long time. We essentially took the Snort engine and have now integrated it into the cloud delivered firewall. So you can run Snort on top of this. Part of the beauty of this as well is that I tend to see a lot of times with customers is the ever-growing need for visibility. And as we continually go from TLS, increased TLS versions, it becomes harder and harder to gain that visibility. It becomes a lot harder to crack. And when you're looking at a firewall specifically, you have to size that firewall. So if you're trying to do decryption, it becomes very burdensome on the CPU. So what we're looking at doing is, because this is a cloud-based solution, we have infinite scale. So we're able to scale this out, whereas if you're trying to do something like this on-prem, it's going to cost you an arm and a leg, and generally speaking, it's not typically feasible unless you got a pretty large wallet. So we try and avoid that, and that's kind of one of the things that we're looking to do as an outcome for our customers here. Now, if kind of going beyond that, if the traffic that we're seeing, once it passes through our cloud delivered firewall, if it is traffic that is based off of 80 or 443, what we will then do is then go ahead and punt that traffic to our secure web gateway. So this is pretty much exactly how you would have your design if you were looking at like an on-premise network, right? I mean, your traffic's going to be routed up through the network. If it's web traffic, it's going to be punted to your secure web gateway or your on-prem security web security appliance. In this case, we're just taking that same aspect and we're pushing it up into the cloud. And so I think one of the biggest benefits of that is because when you have a web security appliance on-prem, you're limited to filtering traffic that is on-prem. So as we kind of accept and embrace this new normal that we live in now that we work from Starbucks or we work from home or we're on the road, being able to have a consistent web policy regardless of where users are at is, as I think, is paramount. It allows us to have, visibility in one location, and it also allows us to consolidate our policies so that way, nothing is getting missed. Every, user, depending on what organization or group they're in, can now have a consistent web policy. And if we need to make exceptions, great, we can. But the idea here is to really make sure that everything is consistent and we have enforcement across the board, regardless of where the user is in their in the network or off network. So after that, right, we continually pass traffic out, and then it gets sent along its way. If at any point it was malicious, we would go ahead and drop or block that traffic, and then from there we would essentially continue along the path. If it was good traffic, send it along its way, and then the user would get to exactly where they needed to be. Any questions or anything, Doreen? If not, I'm going to go ahead and jump into the demo.
Yeah, well, can you talk a little bit about SIG and how it relates to SASE?
Great. Yeah, that's a great question. So this will come up because I think a lot of times there's so many words and jargon that gets thrown out there, right? It oftentimes gets so confusing to customers. I mean, hell, sometimes I get confused because of the new words that come up. Yeah. So what we did was what SIG is it's our secure internet gateway, which was very much focused around an internet gateway like we have with what we call SWG, right? So extending the perimeter beyond just our internal network. So that's what SIG was, essentially taking your perimeter edge and extending it beyond that. And that does include things like secure web gateway, cloud delivered firewall, DNS security. So and it's been a process, right? This didn't just come about overnight. It wasn't just, hey, Gartner decided that SIG was going to be, a thing. We've been expanding upon that for a long time. As I mentioned, our DNS security started in 2006. Then we expanded on with secure web gateway. More recently, we've added in the cloud delivered firewall. So that's kind of been an ever expanding terminology in and of itself. And then as another term that has more recently come about was SASE, which is your secure access services edge. And so that also encompasses many, many more things. One of that being is the secure internet gateway. So SASE incorporates things like secure internet gateway. It includes things like zero trust. It incorporates like an SD-WAN component. So it's a larger scope of what is just SIG, but all still valid types of methodologies of looking at where you stand in your security posture and where you're at kind of in your overall encompassing vision for your company. So it's more of a model to follow, and there's different pieces to each kind of model.
Cool. I mean, that's really awesome to hear. I think so. One thing I want to ask you, Phil. So I think one thing I get from my customers is like, there's no way this is that easy to deploy, right? So can you kind of walk me through, because it sounds like an easy button, obviously you deploy Umbrella and we hope that everything works, but I mean, based on everything you're telling us, it sounds like it's very viable. But could you kind of tell us, like, how would my customer roll this out, and like what are some of the use cases that you've seen in the field where they were able to achieve with Umbrella? Could you kind of walk us through that?
Definitely. Yeah. So I think I touched on it a little bit before, was, to kind of start out, DNS is going to be the easiest and simplest thing to get up and running. There's a reason why our incident response puts that in first, is because really all we're doing is we're leveraging something that's already on the network, and just changing it to send the traffic to us and apply policy on it. So in terms of simplicity and incorporating your network, I mean, it's one of the easiest things to do. It's just really just changing IP addresses. Beyond DNS, the secure web gateway and cloud delivered firewall, there is obviously a little bit more legwork in that, and depending on how you're trying to set it up. I mean, with things like the cloud delivered firewall, we do need to incorporate things like IPsec tunnels. So you'll set up like a tunnel from your head end, whatever that may be, whether it's a firewall, router, you name it. and then, create that tunnel. But those are still, one of the things that we've tried to do is very much streamline that process. So it's not as difficult to set up as, years past of setting up a full IPsec tunnel. And same thing with the secure web gateway, right? I mean, it's leveraging one of our agents to, pass the traffic in one form or another to our design. So those do take a little bit more, I would say a little more legwork compared to DNS, but by no means is it pulling teeth.
Got it. Okay. That sounds really good. Can we go ahead and jump into the demo?
Certainly. Give me one
Awesome.
second. Let me go ahead.
Let's check this out.
Let's go ahead. Cool. Yeah. Okay, and you guys can see my screen?
Yes.
Perfect. All right. Excuse me. So what you guys are seeing, this is an Umbrella account that we have. This is within one of our demo environments within what we call Cisco DCloud. And it is a read-only account, so I just want to make you aware of that right out of the gate. So if there's something that I'm showing you, I won't say that it's different, but because this is the Umbrella dashboard that you would see, it just may be a little bit limited in what I can do because it is a read-only versus a full admin account that has configuration privileges and everything else. But with that said, this is the first page that you get when you log into the dashboard. What it's going to do is it's going to give you, any notices about anything that's kind of new within the system and what's going on. If there's any actions that need to be happened in terms of, tunnels that are being worked on, certificates that are expiring, things like that. Important stuff that the system needs to make you aware of, so that way there's no lapse in the solution and no loss of connectivity. So I can go ahead, I can exit out some of this stuff, and then out of the gate, what it does is it's telling you basic information about the system. So security information is important, and then also what's specifically going on with the deployment and the health of your network. I'll talk a little bit about like different active networks, roaming networks, and what some of this means. But anywhere within here, right, we could go and we can view the trends and pivot into those different places. And so I've been logged in for a minute, so it might have logged me out. So give me 1 second. Let's see if it did. Okay, I think we're still good. All right, cool. So from here, what we're doing is we're looking at essentially the network breakdown. One of the questions that I think is always very interesting to ask is, what we're seeing here is all your different DNS requests. So this would be all the DNS requests for this particular organization over time. And as you can see, like I could pivot into this activity details, and that would give me all 11.6K of those details of, who was going where and what, so on and so forth. One of the interesting things that I always like to ask is if you're a customer and you see total blocks and then you see security blocks, what's the difference there, right? What would cause the difference between me having total blocks and me having security blocks? So I'll give you a second to think on it, and then we'll give you an answer. But a reason why someone would have more, in this case, total blocks versus security blocks is because, again, this is an encompassing solution that incorporates things like DNS, secure web gateway, and with something, let's say like a secure web gateway or even DNS, I can have destination block lists. So although I may not want it may not be a security threat, I'm also going to say, I don't want a user going to xyz.com. And so that is a block, but it's not a security block because it's not something that's necessarily malicious. Now, again, I don't know if xyz.com is malicious, so if you go there, that don't hold me responsible. But those are some of the reasons why you would see more total blocks than versus security blocks. And actually, we'll go look at xyz.com here in a little bit just to see what's going on there. From there, right, we're going to do our firewall breakdown. We'll also look at things like the IPS breakdown. So if we're looking at, IPS signatures, events that are allowed or events that are blocked, we can look at all those different things. And then again, pretty much the standard stuff that you would see with an overview dashboard. Now, this is very powerful, right? There's a lot of different ways that you can use this. So in the example earlier that I gave where, one of our customers got breached, we came in and rolled out Umbrella. We wanted to see 0 for all of this because we had a policy that said we want no traffic going out. So if we saw any spikes within this dashboard, we knew that traffic was being leaked somewhere and we could figure it out. So when you have complete visibility, that's really much, that's the ultimate goal, right? That's the key to being able to lock down a network and understand exactly what's going on. We also have the ability to do application visibility control, so we can find cloud apps. This will be able to help you with things like shadow IT, understand where users are going, what applications are using, and then also be able to lock down those applications. So should we decide that they're not business relevant or they're time waste, and we just don't want our end users going there. And then, like I said, last but not least, most of this stuff is I'll let you guys go through. If you ever want to run a trial or something like that, or get access to a demo environment, feel free to reach out and we can get you access to kind of have your own little test lab and play around and have a demo environment like this. So what I'll move on to next is, like I said, I wanted to kind of go through kind of what the process looks like of at least looking at the policies and what a deployment looks like. And so the first thing that you would expect, and we've kind of broken this down in a structured manner, so it makes sense of how you would go through this process flow. So the next thing that you would do when you first spin up Umbrella would be to set up your deployments. And so what you would do is you would set up your network. So you could say, hey, look, this is the network for AMP. This is the network for our New York City office or DNS headquarters, which is an Umbrella. And setting up these is very straightforward, right? So what I do, and I run this at my house as well. So I went in, I changed my DNS on my Edge router to go to Umbrella. And then what I did was I came in and I just said Phil's home network. And then I went in, I add my IP, I add my suffix, go ahead and click save. And then what it does is it will essentially links my network to the Umbrella cloud. So that way I can apply policy based on that network. And it also allows me to now have visibility into the traffic that's flowing outside, that's going from my internal network out. So there's a lot of power that's done within there. We also have the ability to do things like roaming computers. So for putting an agent on an actual device, we're now able to identify that agent. And we can see, in this case, all these are offline and they just have not synced. But these devices, we can give unique names. We can tie it into AD. It'll let us know what the policy was, what information is going on about it. So having it on a roaming computer, what this allows us to do is have consistent policy and enforcement. If that let's just say laptop goes off network and starts working at a Starbucks, I still now have a DNS policy, and I can incorporate a web security policy as well on that device. Last but not least, what I'll talk about here is our ability to do things like network tunnels. Oh, and actually, before I go on to that, let me go back. So there are a couple different ways that you can deploy the roaming client. The most common way would be through AnyConnect. So there is an Umbrella roaming module that will go into AnyConnect that we can deploy out. And so there's a couple different ways you can do it, right? You can download it directly off of here and install it. You can push out the actual agent to multiple computers at a time. There's a lot of different ways that you can actually get the module onto the actual endpoints that you're looking for. It's really up to you on how you want to do that deployment. But we can do like a one-to-many push. So it simplifies things for if you're like the admin that's managing this. It's definitely there for ease of use. So as for network tunnels, so this part of the deployment would really come into play if we're looking at things like the cloud delivered firewall, because we want traffic from our internal network that's going, remember, this is an outbound firewall. So we need to establish a tunnel that you saw before with that edge device and that Umbrella cloud. So that way the traffic then gets punted, regardless of what port or protocol it is, outbound, so that way we can inspect it and really understand what's going on there. And so in our case, you can see that right now there's 3 active tunnels. We have an Umbrella headquarters tunnel, we have an Umbrella New York City tunnel, and we have an Umbrella RTP tunnel. It'll tell us the different devices that we are using for that tunnel, and then it'll tell us the tunnel ID, data center location, the device public IP address. You know, I appreciate it if you don't, you know, try and take these down, because this is, I think, what we use. So take it as a grain of salt and be nice on the on our side. But just to show you what that tunnel configuration looks like, right? I can just say new tunnel. And then I go ahead and I choose which device I want to leverage for that tunnel setup. And like I said, it could be, you know, anyone that we have within here, or it could be a separate device not listed here. You just select other and leverage everything within there. So I'm just going to go ahead and select FTD just for the sake of selecting an FTD device. And we would go ahead and set up our standard stuff that we would expect for a tunnel, right? So the reachable prefixes for that tunnel. So is it, 10.0.0./8, 176, 192, you name it. And then anytime you're going to set up that IPsec tunnel, you also need to set up the tunnel ID, the network, and then the passphrase, so that way they can establish that authentication between the two. After that, you would, I can't see my little thing here, but you go ahead and click save, and it would start to go through that process to establish that tunnel between the two devices. And that's really all you need. And what it will then do, right, is you'll start to see your tunnels become online within the dashboard here. I'm not going to go through the rest of this stuff in terms of like root certificate, SAML configuration today. If that's stuff you guys want to look into, feel free to reach out after. But there's obviously a lot of other things outside of just your deployments that you can set up. Other things like adding in mobile devices, user groups, Chromebooks, you name it. We have different ways of protecting those using our AnyConnect module or just other forms of protection for those deployments. So if you are interested in kind of learning about those, feel free to reach out and we can expand upon that in a different session. With that said, right, so now that we have our either roaming computer set up, or we have our network set up, or our network tunnel set up, so now we can have traffic essentially from our on-premise network or our roaming computers to now pass traffic to Umbrella. And right now that way it would pass DNS traffic, it would pass traffic on any port protocol or IP. So what we want to do now is we need to start looking at the policies. How are we going to define our policies within Umbrella so that way they're within scope of our corporate corporate policy? Hang on for a second. And so first we'll look at DNS. So DNS policies are fairly straightforward. What we do is you can select where you want them in the order. Let me see if I can go through. Like I said, this is going to be a read-only user, so I won't be able to save and go through everything. But we try to really make this as simple as possible for you to set up. And so it's a wizard that we set you through on what you want to do in terms of policies. So what do you want to have for your DNS policies? What would you like to protect? Do you want access control? Do you want to block threats? And there's a number of different selections that you can turn on within here, and each is described in detail. And then there's some advanced settings if you wanted to go in and do like SSL decryption, if you're doing IP layer enforcement, safe search. So if you're using like search engines, let's say you're like a school and you only want to make sure that what the students and stuff are searching for is appropriate. You could enforce safe search for those particular devices. And then also you can set your logging. So if you want to log everything, or if you only want to log security events, you can do that. Personally, like I said, I have stuff set up at home, so I only log security events because I don't necessarily need to know what my roommates are doing. It's just it's privacy, right? So what you would do is you go through and all this stuff is it's checkboxes, right? It's very simple and easy to get going. What do I want to have enabled and what do I not want to have enabled? From there, you would go ahead and set, what your identities are. So do I want to have this protecting Active Directory computers, groups, AD users? Again, you can pull in all of your Active Directory information from there. You could set up your networks. So like we saw before, we have, the New York City office, AMP, OpenDNS office. It's all up to you on what identities you want to have set for this particular policy. I'm just going to say network devices for this. And then from there, what we'll do is we'll continually go down this line and I can say, okay, what do I want to have blocked, right? I can create my own default policies. So I could do like a monitor only. I could do, default security and protection. You can set your own custom ones if you want, or you can do it all directly from within here. But as I mentioned before, all this stuff is just very much simple click boxes of saying, I want, DNS tunneling with VPN. I want crypto mining blocked. We do have third-party integration. So if you want to integrate with ThreatGrid, or if you're integrating with information that we receive from Checkpoint or FireEye, you name it, we can pull all that information in, Alien Vault, so on and so forth. And then again, all I would do is click save. Now, unfortunately, it's not going to let me go through the rest of this just because of it's being only a read-only user. But what we'll do here is I'll actually hop out and I'll show you kind of what a couple of these things are. So we're going to click cancel. So I'm going to go to a policy that was already created. And so what you're seeing, right, in this mobile device policy is that it's affecting our mobile devices, which is that one identity. It's looking at the security settings that we would have just set. So command and control, malware, phishing attempts, you name it. We can do content settings. So this was one that I didn't specifically get to, but if I go ahead in here and edit, I could apply policy based off of different content categories. So classified, businesses, games, government, hate and discrimination, hacking, you name it, I can create my own custom policy. And again, all this is being blocked at a DNS layer. So as you can kind of probably imagine, we can add in a number of different things. I'm going to go ahead and kind of keep moving forward so we're not just stuck on DNS policies, because I know we have a lot to get through. But this is just some of the things that we can do, and you can always reorder these and move these. We also have this really cool policy tester. So if you want to see how it would affect a particular user, I think like Sally's one. Maybe I don't have it. Or let's just go sales. I could go ahead and I could add in a destination, and it would go ahead and do a policy test against that and tell me specifically which one would hit. So again, really just trying to simplify everything and make it, the easiest for you as an end user and someone that would manage the solution. Now, what we also have is the ability to do web policies. So I'm going to go back to the cloud delivered firewall because I think there's a little bit more there. And DNS policies are a little bit similar to our secure web gateway policies. So one of the things that we have is we have the ability to have what's called rule set rules, and then we have rule set settings. Okay, so this hopefully isn't going to be confusing because it was at first for me. So I'm going to try and simplify it down for everybody. So when I create a secure web gateway policy, what is going to happen is when my traffic gets sent to the secure web gateway over 80 or 443, it's going to come and it's going to look at this first policy that we have set up within here, which is this branch enforcement policy. It contains 13 identities and it has 7 rules applied. So we come in here, and what it's going to do is we have these different rules, but this isn't, although this is at the top, this isn't what it's validating against at first. So what we need to do is we need to set our rule set settings. And what this is that, again, we set our name, we set our identities. Everything that you expect to see that we did in DNS has the same look and feel as what you're going to do within the secure web gateway. You set your networks, your roaming computers, your groups, whatever it may be. You can add a block page. So if you have a custom block page that you currently have maybe with your on-prem that you want to bring over into the secure web gateway, you can go ahead and do that, and you can customize and edit that as you see fit. So you can do a custom appearance and set, whatever you have and create your own. All that's built out within there. We have tenant controls. So if you only want specific traffic to go to, let's say, like Microsoft 365 or G Suite or Slack, you can restrict just traffic to that. So you can make sure that only information is being uploaded or downloaded from that particular corporate group, which I think is very, very powerful. I got in trouble for that a little bit because I was trying to transfer information over. And this was a while back, but I was trying to transfer some information over from our site to my personal computer at home, which I was totally allowed to do. But because of where I was trying to put it within the cloud, I got a nice little notice saying that either I could take the content down, or Cisco IT would take the content down for me and let my manager know. So there's lots of fun stuff and cool things that you can do with tenant controls. But then we also have the ability to do things like file analysis. So do we want to inspect, files that are going through the secure web gateway, right? You could say, hey, look, this is going through the North America region. We do have different regions that you can specify. So if you have compliance restraints, I know like a lot of customers, if we do this over in Europe as well, there's GDPR and other things that we have to comply with. So ensuring that, if we're inspecting traffic in a certain area, it can stay in a certain area, but we do have the ability to leverage file inspection. And then what type of files we're also looking for, right? So are we looking at, data and databases, .tar, .torrent, you name it. There's a multitude of different file types and image types, videos that we can essentially look for within the solution here. So this is also where you're going to set, your HTTPS inspection. If we are doing HTTPS inspection, there is going to need to be a root certificate that gets applied. So we would essentially have to move that root certificate onto the device so that way we can inspect the traffic that is going to be there. And then you could set any number of security settings. We can also do things like with pack files to route traffic. So it's a pretty robust secure web gateway solution. But this rule set settings, what's kind of coming full circle, is essentially where you're going to set your everything initially. So making sure you have the right identities within here is paramount. So if we're setting the rule set settings first, and that's where we're going to look at to see what the structure of this policy looks like. Why do we have rule set rules? What is rule set rules used for? Well, rule set rules allow you to get that much more granular in a rule set settings policy. So what I mean by that is that with this right here, what you're seeing at the bottom, we're seeing that it's affecting 13 different identities. We're also seeing that it has some global file control policies and file analysis policies. So overall, for our branch, this would make sense, right? This is something that we want globally across our branch for everyone to be impacted. Now, generally speaking, there's going to be situations where we have specific users or specific groups that are going to be on that branch that maybe need access to, let's say we don't allow like Facebook typically because that's just not within our corporate policy. We find that our end users spend too much time on Facebook. But let's say for marketing, they need to be able to get out to Facebook to push the brand, be able to, do customer reach out. So they also work on the branch policy. So what this rule set rules allows us to do is, although marketing may be in this 13 identity policy, it will allow us to specify and be more granular within our subset of this rule. Now, again, the reason why we do it this way is because if we did it a little bit different, we would have all these different sub-granular policies. So instead of having just 6 policies here, we may have a bunch more. And if you've been in the security industry for a while, or if you've looked at firewall rules for a long time, like I have, the more rule sets you have, the more just it becomes such a nightmare to manage and understand, and that's how essentially things get missed. So if we can consolidate this into a branch policy and then be specific from there, it provides a lot more value. Some of the other things that we can do within here, like I said, your identities are going to be the same. You can, well, not the same, but you can be granular with your identities. You could be granular with your destinations. But some of the different things that we have, and again, from right here, you can always disable or enable a rule. I can edit this rule, and there's different rule actions. So I can allow the rule to go through. So if I have something that's blocked at the global level, but I want to allow it at a very, very specific level, I can do that. As you can imagine, we have our block rule set, which is what more times than not you're going to use for something like Secure Web Gateway. And then what we also have, which is pretty new, it's been around in our on our web security appliance, our on-prem appliance for a long time, is the ability to do what's called isolate. So what this does is we call it remote browser isolation. So think of a website like msn.com or yahoo.com, inherently a good website. But what they typically will have is they will have affiliate links, marketing sites, scripts that can be embedded into that site that may not necessarily be good. So when we have isolate on there, what it does is when a user would open up a browser to one of those web pages, it will essentially proxy that web request, and it will scan that web page. And that web page will then go ahead and say, okay, these are good elements, these are bad elements, and the bad elements that are in there, it will go ahead and remove those and pull them out. But the user will still be presented with that web page with the bad elements removed. So it's a way for us to add, value and protection to those end users, but still get to a site that is, inherently good. It's just our way of having a little bit of protection. And then you also have things like warn and whatnot. So this is kind of what we look at for a secure web gateway policy. Pretty standard stuff of what you would expect, but with the simplicity and ease of having it completely cloud-based and having visibility and enforcement all in one location. So that's kind of our secure web gateway. What I'll do now is I'm going to jump over into our firewall policy. So this is our cloud delivered firewall. This has really been built from the ground up, excluding really, like I said, our IPS engine, which we took from Firepower, our FTD, and we've brought in. One of the things that we are really known for is our Snort engine. It's a super, super powerful engine. So we've recently just incorporated that into the design. But in terms of everything that's been going on, this is, again, a firewall that's been built from the ground up. Does layer 3, layer 4, and layer 7 application control. And so these are just some of the different firewalls or firewall rules. It goes much like you would expect from a top-down approach. So it'll go ahead and look at the first rule, and based on what it sees, it will either allow that or it will block that based on, and then it'll go to the next one in the chain until it eventually gets to the bottom and says, allow or deny. So to kind of look at this, couple different actions, right? So I can enable, I can disable the rule from directly right here. I can do logging. I can set whether it's going to be a block or an allow rule. If I go in and I edit it, setting up a rule is pretty straightforward. You set your name, you can set a description, you can change where it's at exactly within the list. The criteria will come down and I can say, hey, what port or protocol am I using? Is it TCP? Is it UDP? Is it really just anything? What applications am I looking for? So I'm looking at like any application or specific applications. I would just go over here if I was looking for specific ones and say for this rule, we're going to go ahead, allow or block. Let's just say like e-commerce. We're going to go ahead and add a block to you name it. And then what tunnels are we using? So are we just going to use all of our tunnels that we have set up? Is this like a global policy that's going to affect everything? Any of our tunnels that are coming into Umbrella? Or is this going to be, the New York City, or I think we had RTP or Umbrella HQ. I can go ahead and add that one in. Source IP address CIDRs, things like that. Source ports, destination IPs, destination ports. And then you can also do rule scheduling. hit counters, rule actions. Like I said, pretty much the stuff that you saw that was on the kind of right side of the pane there. I can toggle these things on and off directly from that rule set, so I don't have to necessarily come in here to make all these changes. I can just toggle them directly from the page. But this is what we essentially look at for a firewall-based rule within our cloud-delivered firewall. And then last but not least is kind of expanding upon the intrusion prevention system. So in this case, we see Umbrella's intrusion prevention system is enabled for protection. I can come in here, I can click settings, and I can determine what specifically I have set for this intrusion policy. You can create your own custom intrusion rules. As you would expect with any sort of snort firewall, we do have different settings. So there's detection, and then there's prevention. So you can have it in an inline mode where it's protecting and dropping traffic if it sees malicious. You can also have it in a passive mode where it will be on a detection where it will just alert you to bad things, but it still lets the traffic go through your network. Your signature lists. So these lists, pretty standard. We have connectivity over security, a balanced policy. We have a security over connectivity, and then we have a maximum detection. And these will tell you how many we have like on that are blocking, how many are just logging, and then how many are set to ignore. And as I mentioned, I'll show you in a second that we can actually go through and we can create our own policies. So you don't just have to use one of the predefined ones that are built out within here. We can go ahead and create your own custom one. But in terms of leveraging IPS, this is essentially how we do it. It simplifies the method for you. If you've worked with IPS historically, like years back, it can be quite the hurdle if you're first starting out trying to kind of understand. So being able to just go ahead and come in and say, hey, look, this is what I want turned on. Let's make it simple and easy. This is kind of what that's looking to solve. Let's see what else. So we went through kind of the policies of DNS, firewall, web security policy. We do have the ability to do data loss prevention. So DLP is built within here. I don't know what it's specifically. I don't know what specifically we have right here. So can you guys hear me? I think someone just said that you can't. Okay, cool. Just making sure. nothing like talking to yourself, Cool. So we do have the ability to add in data loss prevention, like I said, within here. So this is kind of probably a little bit of an add-on that I'm going to tell you guys from what we were mainly supposed to talk about with DNS, firewall, and web policies. But I think this is pretty important that it is within Umbrella, is that we can monitor traffic that is in flight. So if you do need DLP, let's just say your organization needs to be able to check for like personally identifiable information, or it needs to check for credit card numbers, or if you're in healthcare, I work with a lot of healthcare customers where you need to check for patient records. This is another feature that can be leveraged within here, and you can set any number of data classification policies. So like if we preview just one of the PII classification ones within here, this is what it specifically includes: bank account, credit card, date of birth, whatnot. And you can set your own custom policies as well. So if you have, something that says, like in our case, it would be like, say, like Cisco internal, we could go ahead and flag that and have that removed if it was trying to be sent over our firewall or web policy. So again, just another powerful, very, very powerful thing or feature that you can incorporate into Umbrella that just kind of expands upon our different policy sets here. So with that being said, we walked through, a little bit of an overview. We've gone through, hey, how do I deploy it? We've talked about the components, or we talked about the management of, hey, these are the policies. And then from there, right, is kind of that last like little step of we have to have the different components. So I've talked about, hey, you can do customization. You have your different drop-down lists. So in our case, right, like I'm just going to use the IPS for example, is that we could create our own custom lists. So I can create my own custom IPS signature list. And in this case, like I can go ahead and let's just say I have like a balanced set connectivity, security and connectivity policy. What it's doing is it's showing me all the different IPS events for blocked that are within here. But if I want to, I can move this into log or ignore if I want to see the details for it. If you're a nerd like the rest of us and you've worked with Snort in the past, this is the Snort policy that we see. We see that it's going to alert based off of our home network to any part of our internal network. This is the message that's associated with it, and essentially what's being referenced all within that Snort policy. It gives you the the SID that's associated with it, and I can even go directly from here to view Snort to get all the additional information about this particular policy. So really it's up to you. If you want to get in the weeds and kind of set up your own custom, policies, you can do that to, like, let's just say maybe your organization is a little more risk averse to specific types of attacks because maybe your network has older devices or something on it, and you need that protection in place. This is why we have that ability to kind of add that customization. And then as I mentioned before, right, there's a multitude of different content components that you can set up, and these get used across the different policy sets. So if you create a destination list, you can use that destination list on both DNS policies and your secure web gateway policies. So create it one time within your policy components and then re-leverage it throughout your entire system. The beauty of this is that you have multiple different solutions. You have a firewall, you have a web gateway, and you have security policy all in one place. So, my customers that come to me when they say they have too many different disparate security products and they can't manage all of them, this is huge, right? It cuts down on all that time. All of your objects are in one place. All of your policies are in one place. That's a huge value add that any management would see. And honestly, at the end of the day, for someone that does like to essentially simplify their life and make things easier, this is kind of why, again, I run this at my house. And it's such an easy talking track for not just me, but for my customers because of how simple and the value that it brings. And all this stuff I've talked about, right? So if you wanted to set your block page appearance, if you wanted to look at your data classification, all of these things are set up directly from right within here. But one thing I will mention is when you're going through, you can pivot into these particular objects. So if I'm saying I need a destination list and I'm on, let's just say my web policy, there's an option to add and pivot into that destination list, so you can create it from right there. So they simplify it out. Last but not least is really just the reporting, guys. So what we do, right, is we have different reporting views based off of what you're looking for. So we have specific ones dedicated just to security overview. So if you want to know what's going on from the security front, say you're part of the SOC and you want to come in and see what's going on from that perspective, you can. What I like a lot of times is the activity search, because this gives me the ability to really kind of go across everything that I know across my entire umbrella organization. So whether it is a firewall, whether it's a web policy, whether it's DNS policy, whether it's just a roaming user, I want to see exactly what's going on from their behavior. And all these search and filters and queries are all from right here. So yeah, because this is just a firewall rule. So I could search for any specific event types. I can look based off of any identity or content categories, you name it. All of this is just searchable for all of my traffic. And so going back a little bit to what I talked about before was, when one of my customers had that breach, we also use this right here to make sure zero traffic. We weren't just looking for security traffic leaving the network. We were looking for any traffic leaving the network. So anything that left, we were essentially looking for. And as we slowly brought specific things online, what we were able to do was make sure that those specific things were the only things that were getting out. It's huge. It's just, there's so much value that can be brought here. And so if I wanted to view like the full details In this case, it's just the firewall. It's a connection to the firewall. We see the destination. We see the port that's associated with it, both internal and the destination. But what it's going here, right, is it's just kind of building it out. We see the protocol, protocol and application protocol. I can view all this stuff directly from right here, and I can search from it across our query fields and add any sort of filters. As I mentioned before, we have app discovery and things like that, so I can determine, hey, what apps are running on my network? What are high risk apps? What apps have I reviewed? What apps haven't I reviewed? And what I want to set. So if you're kind of need a little bit of visibility into your shadow IT that is set on the network, all that can be done from within right here. And then last but not least, I'll just give a little plug to our ability to do investigate. So what we have here is the ability to set and really just go ahead and look at from an investigative perspective what's going on. So I'll use like Cisco.com, and I'll do a smart search on Cisco.com, and it just provides me everything I know about that particular URL and domain. So in our case, it's set from computers. It tells us what the content category is, what the risk score is for this domain, any ASNs or prefixes that have been associated with it, what is the typical DNS query volume for this site. So you can see that, we run around 10 million, or I would say from October, this is what we had from October. So any given day, it's around 10 million requests. We can see when it was first seen. So this domain was first created in 1987, if you can believe that. When the DNS change first happened, it was in 2014, and then it also expires in May 15th of 2022. So if if for some reason it expired and you were able to pick that up, I don't think Cisco is going to miss a drop in renewing that. But if they do, you could probably make a pretty penny off of that. So mark your calendar. And then last but not least, we have like all the DNS resolution, who is data, where traffic's going to and from. So again, this can be valuable if your organization, only does business in certain areas and things like that. You can see, who's trying to request, who's trying to get in, who's requesting your system, just some stuff that I think does bring a value add, and then any associated samples and things like that. So you can expect that with an organization of this size, there's going to be some sort of malware samples. Even Cisco is not why can't I say the right word? Not impervious, I would say, to malware. So there's going to be malware samples with an organization of this size, which is expected. We're aware of them, we block them, but it's also important to know what your organization has, and just kind of understand, what's going on there. So with that said, I think I've covered quite a bit just in this time. Doreen, Joe, do we have any questions or anything?
No, I think it's pretty straightforward. Really appreciate the in-depth demo, Phil. I think, obviously, I think with any Cisco product or with anything, it will definitely take some time, some care and feeding to, figure out like what are the specific use cases that would apply for our customer, right? But I think as a high-level overview, this was excellent. Doreen, did you have anything else you want to add?
No, I thought it was great. It was straightforward. It took all the mystery out of what is Umbrella. I've heard so many things about it being so easy to deploy that you could stand it up in minutes, and now I know why. You displayed that for us visually, and it totally makes sense. The power behind Umbrella and the security that it brings to your organizations today. As I said earlier, we are traversing outside the four walls now. Traffic is no longer inside our infrastructure. It is outside. So we need that visibility. We need that security, and Umbrella provides that for us. Thank you so much, Phil.
Yeah, thank you guys for having me. And I guess one little last plug from my side. If you guys are interested or want to know more, I have plenty of content that I can send you, or if you're interested in, just demoing or trying the product, feel free to reach out to me. Feel free to reach out to, your sales counterpart at Cisco. We're more than happy to get you guys involved and let you, test out the product.
All right, Doreen. So let's talk about your famous YouTube channel here.
My famous YouTube channel, TechGlam TV. So today's episode will be posted on TechGlam TV. There you're going to find episodes of TechGlam Live and other videos related to Cisco. So if you guys have missed any of our previous episodes, They are up there now. For example, like Inner Site Workload Optimizer. I know that's a popular one. A lot of people have been waiting for it. It's up there now. It's ready to view. And AppD and today's episode will also be out there on TechGlam Live really, really soon. AppD was a really good popular episode as well, which takes us back to our full stack observability discussions. And you're probably all wondering, well, what's full stack observability? Go ahead and ping your SE and we'll be more than happy to talk to you about it. But it basically relates to Thousand Eyes, AppD, and Inner Site Workload Optimizer and the value they bring together to give you that visibility of your full stack. So if you want to learn more, like I said, ping your AMs and SEs. In the meantime, please subscribe to the channel and you will get notifications when videos are released.
Right on. And I think we've hit the conclusion of today's episode.
Fantastic. Thank you, everybody, for a fabulous time. Thank you, Joe. Thank you, Phil.
And awesome. So I'm Joe
Thanks,
Mejica. I'm signing out for today's episode.
And I'm Doreen Pepers, and we will chat soon. See you next month.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.